So, the United States government wants to ban people from making online content which covers certain topics they consider to be conspiracy theories. This is yet another sign that the country and the world as a whole marches on toward a totalitarian controlled system. There is a huge amount of irony that goes along with this story. The history of the groups like the CIA, Mi6 and the KGB makes for an interesting and terrifying peek into just what these agencies do when they think they can get away with it. I support the freedom to allow people to be conspiracy theorists. I believe that they act as canaries in the coal mine for free speech. Right now, we see the constant chant of fake news and spin on so many stories that it is difficult to know what the truth is. Those in power are now making moves to limit speech using fake news as a justification. I think any cure they propose would be worse than the disease, so to speak. So let's take a look. Welcome to IF, videos on conspiracy, cryptozoology, ufology and the supernatural. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss a video again. There have over the years been many stories that have leaked out and shone a light on the darkest corners of government. This information often being placed in the public eye because of brave reporters and whistleblowers. In the old days, it was hard to monitor what a reporter was working on, all notes and drafts being kept in a journal in the time before the internet. Today, it is easier to exert control. For all the good it has done, one downside of online publishing is that the flow of information and the validity of a story can be manipulated. Just look at the companies like Cambridge Analytica and the role they played in the US election and Brexit. In this video, I will take a deep dive into the many reports the government wished were silenced but were ultimately exposed. The first up is a case of mind control and abuse, Project MK and the little-known Subproject 68. This is a story of true terror as the US government attempted to control the minds of men, women and children. The CIA ran Project MK and paid one Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron for the Subproject 68. In his program, he would use drugs to alter the minds of his patients. I think victims may be a better description. His therapies involved intense electric shocks, induced comas, and what can only be described as psychological torture. These barbaric acts left the people with amnesia. They forgot about their families and even who they were. When the project was threatened with closure, the doctor used these patients in a scheme that would honey trap high-ranking government officials. This so they could be bribed to continue funding the MK project. These experiments were not only carried out on unfortunate individuals, they were also inflicted on whole communities. In 1955, there were secret Cold War tests in St. Louis. A decade after the tests were carried out, a whistleblower exposed how the army used motorized blowers atop a low-income housing block and at schools and from the backs of station wagons to send a potentially dangerous compound into the air in a predominantly poor black area of the city. During the time of the tests, the local officials were informed that the government would be testing a smokescreen that could shield St. Louis from aerial observations in case of a Russian nuclear attack. Jumping forward in time to 1994, the government, when asked about these tests, claimed that the tests were part of a biological weapons program and that St. Louis was chosen because of its resemblance to Russian cities that the US might want to attack. The material being sprayed was zinc cadmium sulfide, a fine fluorescent powder. This substance is toxic and can cause a number of health problems. St. Louis Community College Merrimack sociology professor Lisa Marantino-Taylor's hard work and researching the incident and what she found raised the possibility that the army were actually performing radiation testing by mixing radioactive particles with the zinc cadmium sulfide, though she concedes there is no direct proof. The area of the secret testing is described in US Army documents obtained by Marantino-Taylor through a Freedom of Information Act request as a densely populated slum district. These tests were not only carried out on American soil, the British government also used its people as human guinea pigs. For decades, the British Ministry of Defence has denied that they used unwitting servicemen as guinea pigs in experiments to see the effects of radiation on the human body during the race to build a nuclear bomb in the 1950s. However, a widow of one Cold War pilot has exploded the MOD's claim of innocence. She obtained secret documents that showed her husband was used in a deadly experiment. He was ordered to fly through the cloud of a thermonuclear explosion. Shirley Denson, 83, said husband Eric received such a massive dose of radiation to his head during his 1958 flight that it caused him to have crippling headaches. These headaches were so bad that he later took his own life, saying he could no longer stand the pain. 2 of their 4 daughters were born with abnormalities, as were some of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The papers show Eric, 24 at the time, had his head alone exposed to 65 years worth of normal background radiation, this amount being equal to 17,500 dental x-rays, all in just 6 minutes. The papers the widow uncovered show that the Tory government of the day knew there was a risk to the men and their children. Shirley said, "It's absolutely wicked. It's evil. To see it in black and white after all these years took my breath away. It seems our government used and abused its own men." There is a long history of militaries experimenting on their own people, the excuse for testing these weapons often being it's needed for national security. They need to know how effective these weapons are, and sometimes animal testing just doesn't cut it. Some of the most horrendous weapons have been tested in this way. The mustard gas that caused so much pain, death, and lingering illness in World War II was tested on the general public and servicemen alike. Officials were known to have sprayed mustard gas and other skin-burning, lung-ruining chemicals like lewisite on soldiers without their consent or knowledge. If this wasn't bad enough, soldiers were also locked in rooms, given experimental gas masks, and then, once again, mustard gassed. A truly horrifying and sickening process, which even if you avoided the physical damage, it would surely leave a person mentally scarred. So who was it running such evil experiments? Most today know about Operation Paperclip. This was the project that saw the US and other allied countries dividing up the spoils of war, those spoils being Nazi and Japanese scientists. Operation Paperclip, a program of the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, netted over 1,500 German scientists, technicians, and engineers from Nazi Germany and other foreign countries. These people were all brought to the United States for employment. One of these barbaric scientists that was granted immunity was a Japanese surgeon who subjected prisoners to involuntary surgeries. Dr. Shiro Ishii was the head of Japan's infamous Unit 731, a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II, a place that can only be compared to hell on earth. Dr. Ishii carried out hundreds of violent human experiments using tens of thousands of people who were captured during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. These lost souls were put through events that are too violent and stomach-churning that I will let you research the story of Unit 731 yourself. Ishii was responsible for testing vivisection techniques without any anesthesia on human prisoners. Vivisection is the act of conducting experimental surgery on living creatures and examining their insides for scientific purposes. So basically, he was giving unnecessary surgery to prisoners by opening them up, keeping them alive, and not using any anesthetic. During these experiments, he would force pregnant women to abort their babies. He also subjected his prisoners to changes in physiological conditions, inducing strokes, heart attacks, frostbite, and hypothermia. Ishii considered these subjects logs. Following imminent defeat in 1945, Japan blew up the Unit 731 complex and Ishii ordered all the remaining logs to be executed. Not soon after, Ishii was arrested. Then, the respected General Douglas MacArthur allegedly struck a deal with Ishii. If the US granted Ishii immunity, he must exchange all germ warfare data based on his human experimentation. So as we can see, the governments of the world have a history that is very far from squeaky clean. So when today we see an increase in censorship and a real effort being aimed at censoring free speech, we do have a reason to be worried. If we live in a truly open, free and fair society, should these secrets be shown the light of day? How can we truly trust a system that hides such callous and vicious crimes? What do you think? Should we trust the governments and let them carry on with their secrets? Or are we at a point today that the truth is more important? Should those that question the established narrative be silenced? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you like what I do here on the channel, hit that red button, like and share. If you'd like to support the channel, links are available in the video description. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.